First of all, apologies for taking a bit longer. First session always has some technical problems, but we're all over. So thank you for being patient. My name is Eliza Camber. That's not gonna go well. My name is Eliza Camber. A bit about me: I'm an Android developer in the Netherlands, in Kenya. I'm also a Google developer expert for conversational AI. And at least before COVID, I used to travel a lot for conferences like this. This is going to be my first time in Chicago Remoto. So I'm super excited that I'm here today with you. If you want to follow along or you want to find my slides, this is a link. It's uploadable, I guess. Yeah, can we turn the lights off? Okay. So this is going to be the link. And for today's agenda, we're going to talk about animations in Jetpack Compose. Who over here already is using Compose? Okay, that makes me happy. That makes me happy. All right, so first we're going to have a small overview. When do we use and where do we use animations? That way we're going to start with the most simple one, but also the most important one, which is ripples, pattern ripples, essentially. We're going to see all of the different animation APIs, and then on top of that some more, like the lazy column animation, Lottie library, and the animated vector Drawables, which I have put over there. And hopefully we will have some time for questions, but I will be around anyway. So, there is an animated rule in the mobile world, and this is that you have about 20 seconds to impress your users. And this does include any loading screens, flashing screens, signing up, logging in, everything. You have 20 seconds. And I took longer to just explain the 20-second rule than actually the 20 seconds are. This is how little time you actually have to make sure that the user will come back and they just won't close the app and never get in. But how do we do that? Like splashing screens, they're never fun. And there are some actions that we have to perform. We can't skip them, like loading our data. That can take a few seconds. So if I have a 20-second window, and then I also need to load my data over there, I need to find a way to not show it straight to the user. So what do? We just add motion. We add something there that is going to distract the user just a little bit so that we can perform the actions that we need to do. And if we add animations, and we do it right, the user wouldn't even realize what's making their experience so joyful and so pleasant. So in addition, it can also help us to surprise them nicely when we have screens that we can't really, they're not obsolete, they're still there. And like signing apps, for instance, or blocking actions like sending a payment, uploading stuff, all of this. So when we're adding motion, there are basically just two rules. The first rule is that it can be distracting to the user and it can be blocking. So if we have a very nice animation with like our button showing like this, if the action that we want to perform is already done, like the uploading, we're not going to let the user wait so that our motion is just completed and then we will move forward. And the second one is that it needs to give feedback to the user. Like, it needs to be there for a reason. We just don't start animating stuff just because. So if we have, for instance, a button and it performs an action, we need to show to the user some feedback, especially if it takes a few milliseconds for it to do something. So, yeah. We are going to start with the simplest one. We're going to start with the ripples.
because it's still one of the important ones, but also one of the easiest ones. Hopefully, you will understand how motion works in Compose. Is this visible for you all? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So we see over here that adding motion, it's just adding the interaction over here and the indication. And there is one flag. This one, if we set it to true, then the animation will be bounded only to this view. It will be restricted only there. If we set it false, then it will just start going all over the screen. And we then have all of the Jetpack Composes Animation APIs. And if you go to the documentation, you will be able to find this very useful diagram that basically, no, don't laugh, it's useful because you follow the questions. And we will see how to use each one of them, and then some more, as I already mentioned. And it's going to be, it's very easy to keep your UI clean like this. All right, so the orange ones are the APIs, like those boxes. The blue ones are basically the question that you have to follow, like, is this going to be repeatable or not? When do I want to start this? There are some animation APIs that are high level, and they are basically used as composables as any other of the UI elements that we have. And those are backed with some low-level APIs that are Kotlin coroutine suspend functions. All right, we are going to start with high-level APIs first. So if we want to animate the visibility of the content that we have, the appearance and the disappearance of it, then we can use the animated visibility. And as you can see over here, it's just a composable. So we just use it as we do with all of the rest of the UI elements and composables that we have. In here, we can wrap any element that we want to appear and disappear. So an example would be this. By default, the content appears by fading in and expanding, and it disappears by fading in and shrinking. There are quite a few enter and exit transitions that we can use. And for each one of them, you have the opposite for the exit one. So we have the fade in, the fade out, and the slide in, the slide out, sliding horizontally, sliding vertically, and slide out accordingly. The scaling, which is scale out, expand, and shrink, expand again, and shrink horizontally or vertically. You don't have to use them with that order. You can use them with any order that you want, or you can mix and match. But those are the animations that are already built in for the system. Of course, you can build your own. So for the animated visibility, we can also customize what we want. And to customize it, we are going to use the enter and the exit transitions. I'm here using the building, and I am just saying what I want. Like, I don't want it to go from the screen, from the exit of the screen. So over here, I'm just saying that, okay, start this from 100 pixels, for instance. And then we see something like this, instead of the previous one that was just the default. And we can also combine animations. So if we don't want just one animation or we want multiple, then just with the plus sign over here, we can just combine as many as we want. A more complicated example would be like this, or this. So this is sliding in and fading for the enter animation, and expand and fade out for the exit animation. One of Android Studio's most useful tools when it comes to animation, it has been the animation panel. And in the animation panel over here, you can see that you can have it right next to your code. You can play the animation, you can check the speed of the animation, and then you can also go manually through that and check frame by frame how your animation is playing out. And you have the same, of course, for the exit animation or any other animations that you have. And you can see all of them together and each one of them separate. All right, so now that we've seen the animated visibility one, let's go to the animated content. So the animated content also high level, so that means that we're going to use it as composable. We use it over here, animated content. We can have a transition spec. That transition spec is basically what kind of animation we wanted, what kind of transition we want to have. And here we can also, it's still from the previous slide, but the built-in transitions that we saw. And then we have a target state. Animated content is animating everything based on state. Over here, I have a boolean that it's going to be like if it's expanded or not. Basically, it's just a glitch listener. And then depending on my state, then I'm animating my card content. It's basically this. So it's showing or it's expanding, and that's all. So this is without, and this is with. This is slow down so that you can also see the motion. All right. So as I mentioned over here, we have Boolean. That Boolean, going back to that. Here we can use this as it is with the transition as it is right now as a composable, or we can use it from the transition, the update transition, and we can call it like this. And this is going to give us some more customized content. So if we want to be able to customize a bit more how it's going to appear or disappear, then we can do it like this. This is the experimental. So be careful. All right, and we're going to the crossfade one. The crossfade is very similar. It also works with the states, but when we have an entire layout that it's going to change, then we're going to use crossfade because it just shows better. It's basically just that. If you want to animate between two layouts, two very separate two layouts, then we're going to use the crossfade. If we only have the content that we want to animate, then we're going to use the animated content. And difference, as you can see over here, it's not transforming from one to another. It's just fading in and out completely. Okay, and then what if we don't want to animate the entire screen, or we have something that it's like a card, and then we tap on a card just to see more information. Then we can't use any of the other two because it's not basically a state for each of those cards. It's just animating the content size that we want. So the example would be this one. So we have the card, we're expanding it, and then swinging it again as the user is tapping through. And here, there is a big difference, as we see with the previous high-level APIs that we saw, because this one is used as a modifier and not as a separate composable. The code is very simple, so you just add it to your modifier, and that's basically all. Then you just use the modifier to the surface or to the card that you want. That's basically all. You don't have to do anything else. Then the API will take care of all of the transitions that is going to happen. And finally, we have the animate as state. And the functions are the simplest animation APIs functions that we have. For the high-level ones, you only provide the end value, and then the library is going to take care of all of the rest. So that's all that you do. There are a couple of attributes that we can have. There are a few options available, like the animate float, animate color, animate DP, offset. So there are a few options over there according to your use case, whether you want to animate. And you can also add support for other data types by just using a converter. So if something is not appearing in the list, you can just create your own. Okay, so let's say that we want to animate the color. Like we have a color, we have a heart, and when we tap on the heart, we want to just change the color of the heart. We can use it like this without animating anything, and then basically it just changes the color, doesn't do anything else. But if we want to add some animation in that, so that it's not just from the pink to the red one, just fading in and out a bit more smoothly, then we change from this to this. So we see that we only have to change one thing, and instead of just providing the color, we provide the animated color as state. And that's it. Then it goes in a bit more smoothly instead of just popping in and out. We can also use, again, the animation spec, which is very similar to the transition spec that we saw before. We want to customize even more what we're seeing. So over here, I'm adding a queen, which is in the... Why not? Okay, so that would have slowed down a bit the whole animation, so that you would be able to see it a bit more. You can fade in, you can even shrink the colors, which was weird to see. But you can use basically all of the transitions that we saw before. All right. Low-level APIs. The rest, basically, we've already seen the animated visibility, the animated content in the crossfade, the animated content size, and the animate as state. So now we have the animation, which is the most basic Compose API animation that we can find. And basically, everything is built on top of that. Then we have the animatable, the update transition, which we briefly already saw in the slides, if you remember. The remember infinite transition, the animation state, or animate. We're going to start with the animatable. So let's go back to our heart. Hopefully the videos are going to play at some point. And we want to animate the animate color state to our animatable. So the code will just change from this, that we would have a color right here, to something like this. So we remember that this is an animatable, and then we just animate it to whatever colors we want. And we can see here that the main difference between those two is that in the previous one, we only needed to set the end value and the start value. Like, it would be just two of them. But now over here, we can have an initial value that is different from the animation that we want. So it's basically three states that you can now have. You can have an initial state and then animate all of the rest. Okay, and then we can also add this. So animatable is a bit different because low-level APIs, we said that they're not composables, but they're functions, like suspend functions, totally suspend functions, so we can use them as we want, as we would do with any other suspend functions. So let's say that we want to have it launched from a launched effect over here. We could just animate over there. We don't have to deal with the code, with the rest of the code. And that, of course, can also be in a separate block. It doesn't have to be in a composable, inside a composable. And now it shows. Okay, so it's basically exactly the same thing. Even if you use the animatable or the animate color state, the difference is that animatables can be used as suspend functions. So launched effects or whatever you want, doesn't have to be in the composable, while the animate state has to be within the composable. And then the animate state only has a first target value and the final target value, while the animatables have an initial value, a first target value, and then the final one. All right. So let's go to the update, the transition. And we've already briefly saw the transitions. And those are, again, low-level APIs, which means that they're just suspend functions again. And the update transition, it will create and remember a transition state for you. It's going to update itself. So we specify the target values for each of the states that we want. Here I have 2 of them. Could be as much as we wanted. And then we just use it like this. So we have the transition and the animate color. It has a few functions as well. As we saw with the animate state, that one has a lot of attributes that we can have here. So we could have a when over here, and then we could have used that one. So these animate functions, it will return the animated value when it's updated. It's going to be frame by frame. And when it's updated, it just remembers the updated version of itself as well, of its state. And then here, the target state. Oh yeah, the target state over here, I have a Boolean, but it can be any data type that we want over there. It can be a custom enum, for instance, like over here. We could have, according to what screen we have, it could be a custom enum that we would add over here, and then we could set a different background for every single value that we want over there. And that would be the result. So you can see that we can also combine animations, of course, with the transitions. And this is with the transition spec. So over here, it's just with the default transitions. And we can see that everything works in sync. And over here, we just customized it so that it's scaling and it's fading out with a different time. So we can do whatever we want, again, over there, updating everything. Okay, and we saw that as we have with the animate state, we also have here the animate color, animate float, animate DP, animate int, and again, if we want another data type that it's not supported over there, we can use converter, and then we can add our own converter in order to have our data type over there. All right, so if we want our animation to start the moment that we enter the composition, and to keep going till we actually cancel it, we can use the remember infinite transition. And a very good example for that would be, for instance, a loading, like a loading indicator. Infinite transition can hold 1 or more children for transitions. And again, it's remembering its own state, so we just need to cancel it when we don't want it anymore, and that's it. My gifts today won't play. Okay, so imagine this, instead of a loading, just being a loading indicator. Okay, so we can create an infinite transition like this. Again, we can see that it's super easy. All we do is just call the remember infinite transition, and then we just call any extension function that we want over here. It's the same ones that the ones that we saw before with the animate to. So the infinite transition, of course, it's a subclass of the transition. So we can just use the same extension functions that we had over here. We had an initial value and the target value, and it will take care all of the rest for us. And of course, we can also use the animation spec parameter to customize again whatever we want. And then again, all we have to do is to just use it. And here we can see that we can also have keyframes. So let's say that in the X millisecond, you want it to be in that keyframe or that color. And in the Y keyframe, we want it to be on that color. Then we can set everything over here, exactly the milliseconds that we wanted and the alpha or the colors that we want. And then we don't have to deal with any of the rest. Okay. And finally, we have the animation. And everything that we've saw so far is built on top of the animation API. But animation should only be used if none of the previous ones actually cover your use case. It's a very basic, very low-level animation API. It doesn't have concept of the life cycle in it, so you have to be very careful when you're using it. And you should only use it if you manually want to control the time of the animation. That's all. Okay. Another very common animation that we have in our applications is within the navigation. So for the navigation animations, we're going to use the accompanies library that already has some animations there for us. Are you familiar with the accompanies library? Hands? Okay, so not too many. Accompanies library is, it's not just one library, basically. It's a series of libraries. What do you say? Yes, okay, yeah. It's a few libraries over there, but they have some transitions, animations, or some composables that we can use. For instance, the constraint layout is one of them in the accompanies library. So let's say that we have our navigation. We have the nav controller over here. Just remember the nav controller. And then in our sample, we have our navigation host, right? All familiar with this code? Okay. So in order to change to an animated one, the changes that we have to do are very simple. First, we just add in our build Gradle the dependency, and then we change the navigation controller to an animated navigation controller instead of a normal one. And then we come over here and instead of navigation host, we use the animated navigation host. And this is all that you need, basically. Then you just have your composables. If you want to be more specific and use your own animations or any other transitions that are not the defaults, you can just use the enter transition over here and add whatever transition you want. You can also have an exit over here for the exit transitions. So this is without any navigation animations. Just the screens that we know. And then this is if we add navigation. So we say that it's a little more smooth. It provides a little more smooth, a better experience for the users. All right, lazy color animations. I think that there is no single developer that is not using recycler view or a lazy column. And a lot of those times we have to reorder or delete or add something more to our list. And in order for the user to know where the icon or the item that they were seeing before is going, we need to provide some feedback to them, right? That's all that motion is about, feedback to the user. Okay, so for the lazy column animations to work, we don't need to do a lot, thankfully. So all we have to do basically is to just have comparator. No? Yes, yeah, comparator. Sorry. So basically, we just need to tell to our layout how to distinguish between each item. So each of our items over here have a unique ID, and this is one way that we can specify that this is number one, this is number two. And then we just use the comparator over here. We remember the comparator, and we sort our list according to that. And then we just use this modifier, which is the animated item placement. That's all. Then whenever we have deletion or reordering or anything to our list, the system will just take care of it. Let's see if that will play. Maybe? Okay. So we can see the animated one. So you can see that it goes like, it goes a bit more smoothly than actually just popping in and out. I'm sorry for the videos that are not playing. All right. Does anyone know about Lottie? Like the Lottie library? Yeah, cool. Thankfully, Lottie is now available for Compose as well. For those that don't know, Lottie is basically a very nice way for you to use the After Effects animations into your application. So anything that it's just a bit, any image that it's just a bit too complicated or too complex to actually do through the code, Lottie is just doing an incredible job with helping us out with that. And it creates a JSON file from the After Effects, and then we use that JSON file. So you can almost see over there that is, instead of having like an empty screen, then we can just show something to the user. This application, like the demo application that I had, is for treats. So for me, it kind of made sense, instead of just having an empty screen over there, to just add a very subtle motion for the empty screen, because I can't do anything if the user hasn't added any treats yet. And it kind of makes it a bit more enjoyable for the user and for the eye, a bit more tempting to them for actually adding their data. Okay, so for using it, we have a composition over here, and all we have to do is to just remember the Lottie composition that we can just get from our resources, and then they have a composable, and we can use that composable with a composition, and that is all. So you just use the Lottie composition composable. Now let's say that we want something a bit more complex and not just for it to play once. All right, so we can have a state over here, and then we get the animate Lottie composition state. Again, we put the composition over here. We add like our code when it should actually play. And then here I have a disposable effect with the handler. So every few seconds, for instance, it will just start animating itself again. And again, we just use it over here like any other composables that we would have. And finally, we're going to see the animated vector drawables. An animated vector drawable example, perfect example for me, is this one. That was created by Nick Butcher. He is a DA in Google and in the Android team. And we can see that over here, there are quite a few animations that are happening in the same time. So it's morphing with the leg going up. The dots are moving, they're fading in, they're fading out. So it's a quite complex animation, but this is very simple to do. It's just animated vector drawables. And this is not even the most complex example that you can have with the animated vector drawables. They are very, very powerful. And they're also very, very easy to use for in Compose. So as we have with our icon like this, we get the animated vector resource instead of just getting the normal resource. And then we remember the animated vector, and that's all. That's all that we have to do. Okay, so there are a couple of more which I'm going to skip, and because I don't think that there is not. No. Okay, so we have the collapsing toolbar. That could probably be a talk by itself. Collapsing toolbars are with the motion layout. Motion layout in Compose works very similar to what we already know from our views. So it's exactly the same thing as we have with the constraint layout. Then we switch to the motion layout. There is also something called a look ahead layout in Compose. Not quite sure if you know it, but you should definitely check this out. Basically, it's doing exactly what its name is suggesting. It's looking ahead, so then it's easy for you to make any calculations for your next stage and then do all of your animations. And there are some physics-based animations that are already, like, I think that it's, again, the Accompanies library that has them. There is the shared element transitions. We already saw the navigation, and there is an enter and an exit. The difference with the views that we have is that there are three transitions, navigation transitions that we have in views. We have the enter, we have the exit, and then we also have the shared element. The shared element doesn't work outside of the box with Compose, at least yet. But there is a library for that. It's called the Orbitary library. So you can have a look on that. And then, again, if you want to use your own, then you should be able to make that happen with a look ahead layout, because you can see where it should be on the next stage. So you can basically just add the smooth navigation for the shared element that you want to translate. Also, there is a talk tomorrow about the constraint layout. And if you're interested in finding out more for the motion layout and especially the collapsing toolbar, I think that this is a great way to start. And I don't know, do I have time for questions? John? John, time for questions?
I have seen.
Do I have time for questions?
You have a few minutes.
Okay.
There's one or two.
Okay, all right. So I'm all open for questions.
Good job.
Yes, please.
Are there any tools to see, for example, possible frame drops and so on to check the performance of the animations?
The inspection window should show a lot of those things, and also the preview window. Like if there is, I've never had it, to be honest. But if there is a keyframe somewhere that is dropped, it should show in the preview, the animation preview window that I showed before. Yes, please.
Doing testing of animations?
I had done some testing. I think that it's a whole new topic for that. For the animation APIs that the system already has, it's very easy to just continue the testing that they're already doing. With some of the libraries, I found it a bit more hard to do. Yes, please.
So is anything like you need to be careful about the life cycle and the decomposition?
So if for the high level APIs, no. Like everything is taken care of for you. You don't really have to do anything because they are composables, and the system will take care of that. For the low level APIs that are suspend functions, then you have to be careful and to cancel those jobs yourself. So either with a launched effect, if you're going to use transitions, for instance, or with a disposable effect, you don't want it like the loading screen that we saw before. And if you go to the lowest level API that we have, the animation API, you should take care of everything yourself.
All right, yes.
What mechanisms exist for sequencing different views?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah, so all the examples you had were with like a single view. You had an animation you wanted where multiple views were involved, doing different things.
Did I? Wait. I think that I didn't have an example of this one. But if you use transitions with composables, with a high level, it's going to be like the default that it's going to use. If you use the transitions though, then you can just customize everything that you want because you can just add them or chain them. They're just suspend functions. So you can chain one after the other, and then you can have as many transitions as you want. All right, I think that we're out of time. Thank you so much. And if you have more questions, I will be around for all 2 days.